Hi guys, welcome back to Matilda by Roald Dahl. I am back sooner than I thought I was going to be. I had a very long day, but I'm going to use this as my chill time. This chapter is called Practice, or Roald Dahl's own work, and I'm just reading for entertainment and pleasure. And I'll read the next two chapters, and then hopefully the last one very, very soon. Let's get going. The practice. Matilda found the house empty as usual. Her father was not yet back from work. Her mother was not yet back from bingo, and her brother might be anywhere. She went straight into the living room and opened the drawer of the sideboard where she knew her father kept a box of cigars. She took one out and carried it up to her bedroom and shut herself in. Now for the practice, she told herself. It's going to be tough, but I'm determined to do it. Her plan for helping Miss Honey was beginning to form beautifully in her mind. She had it now in almost every detail, but in the end of it all depended on her being able to do one very special thing. With her eye power, she knew she wouldn't manage it right away, but she felt fairly confident that with a great deal of practice and effort she would succeed in the end. The cigar was essential. It was perhaps a bit thicker than she would have liked, but the weight was about right. It would be fine for practicing with. There was a small dressing table in Matilda's bedroom with a hairbrush and a comb on it and two library books. She cleared these things to one side and laid the cigar down in the middle of the dressing table. Then she walked away and sat on the end of her bed. She was now about 10 feet from the cigar. She settled herself and began to concentrate, and very quickly this time she felt the electricity beginning to flow inside her head, gathering itself behind the eyes, and the eyes became hot, and millions of tiny little invisible hands began pushing out like sparks towards the cigar. Move, she whispered, and to her intense surprise, almost at once, the cigar with its little red and gold paper bands around its middle rolled away across the top of the dressing table and fell onto the carpet. Matilda had enjoyed that. It was lovely doing it. It had felt as though sparks were going round and round inside her head and flashing out of her eye. It had given her a sense of power that was almost ethereal. And how quick it had been this time, how simple. She crossed the bedroom and picked up the cigar and put it back on the table. Now for the difficult one, she thought. But if I have the power to push, then surely I have the power to lift. It is vital. I learn how to lift. Also, I have the power to lift. It is vital. I learn how to lift. Sorry, I've just read that again. I must learn how to lift it right up into the air and keep it there. It is not a very heavy thing, a cigar. She sat on the end of the bed and started again. It was easy now to summon up the power behind her eyes. It was like pushing a trigger in the brain. Lift, she whispered. Lift, lift. At first the cigar started to roll away, but then, with the Matilda concentrating fiercely, one end of it slowly lifted up about an inch off the table. With a colossal effort, she managed to hold it there for about 10 seconds. Then it fell back again. Phew, she gasped. I'm getting it. I'm starting to get to do it. For the next hour, Matilda kept practicing, and in the end she had managed, by the sheer power of her eyes, to lift a whole cigar clear of the table about 6 inches into the air, and hold it there for about a minute. Then, suddenly, she was so exhausted she fell back on the bed and went to sleep. That was how her mother found her later in the evening. What's the matter with you? The mother said, waking her up. Are you ill? Oh, gosh, Matilda said, sitting up and looking around. No, I'm all right. I was a bit tired, that's all. From then on, every day after school, Matilda shut herself in her room and practiced with the cigar, and soon it all began to come together in the most wonderful way. 6 days later, by the following Wednesday evening, she was able to not only lift the cigar into the air, but also to move it around exactly as she wished. It was beautiful. I can do it, she cried. I can really do it. I can pick the cigar up and with my eye power and push it and pull it in the air any way I want. All she had to do now was put her great plan into action. The next chapter, the third miracle. The next day was Thursday, and that, as the whole of Miss Honey's class knew, was the day on which the head mistress would take charge of her first lesson after lunch. In the morning, Miss Honey said to them, one or two who did not particularly enjoy the last lesson when the head mistress took the class, so let us all try to be especially careful and clever today. How are your ears, Eric, after your last encounter with Miss Trunchbull? She stretched them, Eric said. My mother said she's positive they are bigger than they were. And Rupert, Miss Honey said, I'm glad to see you don't lose any of your hair after last Thursday. My head was really jolly sore afterwards, Rupert said. And you, Nigel, Miss Honey said. Do please try not to be a smart aleck with the headmistress today. You really were quite cheeky to her last week. I hate her, Nigel said. Try not to make it so obvious, Miss Honey said. It doesn't pay. She's a very strong woman. She has muscles like steel ropes. I wish I was grown up, Nigel said. I'd knock her flat. I doubt you would, Miss Honey said. No one has ever got the better of her yet. What will she be testing us on this afternoon? A small girl asked. Almost certainly the 3 times table, Miss Honey said. That's what we're all meant to have learnt this past week. Make sure you know it. Lunch came and went. After lunch, the class reassembled. Miss Honey stood at one side of the room. They all sat silent, apprehensive, waiting. And then, like some giant of doom, the enormous Trunchbull strode into the room in her green breeches and cotton smock. She went straight after her jug of water and lifted it up by the handle and peered inside. I am glad to see, she said, that there are no slimy creatures in my drinking water this time. If there had been, then some exceptionally unpleasant would have happened to every single member of this class, and that includes you, Miss Honey. The class remained silent and very tense. They had learnt a bit about this tigress by now, but nobody was about to take any chances. Very well, boomed the Trunchbull. Let us see how well you know your 3 times table. Or to put it another way, let's see how badly Miss Honey has taught you in the 3 times table. The Trunchbull was standing in front of the class, legs apart, hands on hips, scowling at Miss Honey, who stood silent to one side. Matilda, sitting motionless at her desk in the second row, was watching things very closely. You, the Trunchbull shouted, pointing a finger at the size of a rolling pin at a boy called Wilfred. Wilfred was on the extreme right front of the row. Stand up, you, she shouted at him. Wilfred stood up. Recite the 3 times table backwards, the Trunchbull barked. Backwards, stammered Wilfred, but I haven't learnt it backwards. There you are, cried the Trunchbull, triumphant. She's taught you nothing. Miss Honey, why have you taught them absolutely nothing at all in the last week? That is not true, headmistress, Miss Honey said. They have all learnt their 3 times table, but I see no point in teaching it to them backwards. There is little point in teaching anything backwards. The whole object of life, headmistress, is to go forwards. I venture to ask whether even you, for example, can spell a simple word like wrong backwards straight away. I very much doubt it. Don't you get impertinent with me, Miss Honey, the Trunchbull snapped. Then she turned back to the unfortunate Wilfred. Very well, boys, she said. Answer me this. I've seen apples, 7 oranges, and 7 bananas. How many pieces of fruit do I have altogether? Hurry up. Get on with it. Give me the answer. That's adding up, Wilfred cried. That isn't the 3 times table. You blithering idiot, shouted the Trunchbull. You pestering Dumble, you flea-bitten fungus. That is the 3 times table. You have 3 separate lots of fruit, and each has 7 pieces. 3 sevens are 21. Can't you see that, you stagnant cesspool? I'll give you one more chance. I have 8 coconuts, 8 monkey nuts, and 8 nutty little idiots like you. How many nuts do I have altogether? Answer me quickly. Poor Wilfred was properly flustered. Wait, he cried, please wait, I've got to add up 8 coconuts and 8 monkey nuts. He started counting on his fingers. You bursting blister, yelled the Trunchbull, you moth-eaten maggot. This is not adding up, this is multiplication. The answer is 3 eighths, or is it 8 threes? What is the difference between 3 eighths and 8 threes? Tell me that, you mangled little wurzel, and look sharp about it. Now Wilfred was far too frightened and bewildered even to speak. In 2 strides the Trunchbull was beside him, and some amazing gymnastic trick, it may have been judo or karate, she flicked the back of Wilfred's legs with one of her feet so that the boy shot off the ground and turned a somersault in the air. But halfway through the somersault she caught him by the ankle and held him dangling upside down like a plucked chicken in a shop window. 8 threes, the Trunchbull shouted, swinging Wilfred from the side. 8 threes is the same as 3 eighths. The 3 eighths are 24. Repeat that. At exactly that moment, Nigel at the other end of the room jumped to his feet and started pointing excitedly at the blackboard and screaming, The chalk! The chalk! Look at the chalk! It's moving all on its own! So hysterical and shrill was Nigel's scream that everyone in the place, including the Trunchbull, looked up at the blackboard. And there, sure enough, a brand new piece of chalk was hovering near the grey-black writing surface of the blackboard. It's writing something, screamed Nigel. The chalk is writing something. And indeed it was. Agatha. What the blazes is this? Yelled the Trunchbull. It had shaken her to see her own first name being written like that by an invisible hand. She dropped Wilfred onto the floor. Then she yelled at nobody in particular. "Who's doing this? Who's writing it?" The chalk continued to write. "Agatha, this is Magnus. This is Magnus." Everyone in the place heard the gasp that came from the Trunchbull's throat. "No!" she cried. "It can't be! It can't be Magnus!" "It is Magnus, and you better believe it." Miss Honey at the side of the room glanced swiftly at Matilda. The child was sitting very straight at her desk, the head held high, the mouth compressed, the eyes glittering like two stars. "Agatha, give my Jenny back her house." For some reason, everyone now looked at the Trunchbull. The woman's face had turned white as snow, and her mouth was opening and shutting like a halibut out of water and giving out a series of strangled gasps. "Give my Jenny her wages. Give my Jenny the house. Then get out of here. If you don't, I will come and get you. I will come and get you like you got me. I am watching you, Agatha." The chalk stopped writing. It hovered for a few moments. Then suddenly it dropped to the floor with a tinkle and broke in two. Wilfred, who had managed to resume his seat in the front row, screamed, "Miss Trunchbull has fallen down! Miss Trunchbull is on the floor!" This was the most sensational bit of news of all, and the entire class jumped up out of their seats to have a really good look. And there she was, the huge figure of the headmistress, stretched full length on her back across the floor, out for the count. Miss Honey ran forward and knelt beside the prostrate giant. "She's fainted," she cried. "She's out cold. Someone go and fetch the matron at once." 3 children ran out of the room. Nigel, always ready for action, leapt up and seized the big jug of water. "My father says cold water is the best way to wake up someone who's fainted," he said, and with that he tipped the entire contents of the jug over the Trunchbull's head. No one, not even Miss Honey, protested. As for Matilda, she continued to sit motionless at her desk. She was feeling curiously elated. She felt as though she had touched something that was not quite of this world, the highest point of the heavens, the farthest star. She had felt most wonderfully the power surging up behind her eyes, gushing like a warm fluid inside her skull, and her eyes had become scorching hot, hotter than ever before, and things had come bursting out of her eye sockets, and then the piece of chalk had lifted itself up and begun to write. It seemed as though she had hardly done anything, and it had all been so simple. The school matron, followed by 5 teachers, 3 women and 2 men, came rushing into the room. "By golly, someone's floored her at last," cried one of the men, grinning. "Congratulations, Miss Honey." "Who threw the water over her?" asked the matron. "I did," Nigel said proudly. "Good for you," another teacher said. "Shall we get some more?" "Stop that," the matron said. "We must carry her up to the sick room." It took all 5 teachers and the matron to lift the enormous woman and stagger with her out of the room. Miss Honey said to the class, "I think you'd all better go out to the playground and amuse yourself until the next lesson." Then she turned and walked over to the blackboard and carefully wiped out all the chalk writing. The children began filing out of the classroom. Matilda started to go with them, but as she passed Miss Honey, she paused and her twinkling eyes met the teacher's eyes, and Miss Honey ran forward and gave the tiny child a great big hug and a kiss. Okay, guys, that is the end of those 2 chapters. Thank you so much for listening. The next chapter that I'll read will be the last chapter in the book. So thank you again for listening. Really do appreciate it. Until the next time. Goodbye, guys. Bye.